Hey listeners, it's Kara, your host. After 176 amazing episodes and hundreds of book recommendations, I wanted to make it a little bit easier for you to find your next great read. The Bookish Flights Roadmap is your guide to all 175 podcast episodes, sorted by genre so you can quickly find the stories that fit your reading mood. From picture books to adult novels and everything in between, it's the perfect way to explore past episodes and discover new favorites. You can find your copy of the Bookish Flights Roadmap at www.bookishflights.com/read/roadmap, or just click the link in the show notes. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, we have Amanda Cox joining us for the BFF Book Club to discuss The Bitter End Birding Society. And if you hear my voice, listeners, I just happened to catch something from my kiddos and lost my voice, so bear with me today. But Amanda is a therapist turned novelist who pens stories about characters finding hope, healing, and a sense of belonging. She resides in Tennessee with her husband and 3 children, and you may recognize Amanda's name from back in episode 95. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat about this book with you all.
Yes. Well, for listeners that are maybe hearing of you the first time, I love to ask first to tell us a little bit more who you are, because I feel like we're so much more than these bios. So let's kick it off with that.
So I am a homeschooling mom of 3, and I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we love to travel every chance that we get. My heart is happiest when I am outside. I'm a terrible gardener, although I do try, and a hobby beekeeper. And those are some things that I do when I'm not wrapped up in the world of writing.
Yeah. So did you, like, out of curiosity, because I feel like a lot of homeschooling families choose it for the flexibility of schedule, and you've mentioned you love traveling. Did that go into your decision, or did you always see yourself homeschooling?
Well, I definitely didn't see myself as a homeschooling mom. I was kind of public school kid all the way through growing up, but my husband was homeschooled, so he
Okay.
definitely had got to experience the benefits of that flexibility. And so that was definitely in his mind, and I've, enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, now that my oldest is in traditional school, I do miss that, being able to travel in like the off seasons when not everybody else is traveling. But now we're tied
Yes,
to his schedule, so we can't do
right.
that as easily anymore. So, well, you've had a new novel come out since you joined us last, and it was called The Bitter End Birding Society. And for listeners that maybe haven't gotten to read it yet, can you tell them a little bit about it?
So it's this story about this young woman who has had a pretty rough year, and gone through a traumatic experience. And during that time, because of the way that she handled it, people kind of lauded her as like hometown hero, and she got a lot of attention for it, but she really doesn't feel like she deserved this attention. So it's been a challenging year for her. And so when summer comes around, she decides she's going to reconnect with her great aunt and help her out for the summer. And it's kind of in her mind going to be that she can be anonymous for a little while, or nobody knows about any of that stuff, and she can kind of get a refresh, get to know her aunt, but nothing goes to plan in Bitter End for her. That's the name of the small town where her aunt lives. And she ends up in the house trying to deal with her aunt's things, adopted against her will, a little bit against her will, by this birding society. And along the way, she stumbles into the fact that one of the members of birding society is also related to her, and it's a severed branch of the family tree in which a moonshiner's daughter fell in love with a preacher's son, and it caused a bit of a rift. And it's caused a rift in this little community of Bitter End between these two women who, even though they live on the same street, haven't spoken for 60 years.
And I think about that as I read this book of I feel like you hear all the time of people like these estrangements that happen, and whether that's with family or friends. And like I think of that and I'm like, well, how does that happen? And especially in this novel where it went on for 60 years, it's like, how does that even happen in your family? And we think about all these principles like we should forgive, we should let them back in. And it was so interesting to explore it in a novel. So I really enjoyed that part.
It was fun kind of I always love to write about family dynamics and
Yeah.
interesting family dynamics and complications in those family dynamics. And to kind of have these two women and think about what would cause them to have a rift like that, and why was the rift there, and misunderstandings that are there. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to kind of explore as I was deciding how I was going to shape and write this story.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like everything, God's timing, right? Or everything happens serendipitously. But at our Bible study this week, we were talking about family estrangement and actually then like the stories we begin to tell ourselves in that estrangement, right? Which only keeps you
Yeah.
further separated. And you saw this happening between these two characters as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe we tell ourselves these stories so we feel better about like our decision of why we're not talking
Yeah.
to this person, which
Yeah.
only ends up being more detrimental, I think, in the long run.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes a way to try to make sense of things, and we take the pieces and the perceptions that we know, and that's all we can build on if we're not willing to like step into that space and hear someone else's perspective
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
whatever reason, pain or fear or whatever that motivation is.
I feel like and like emotions are usually driving that too,
Oh yeah.
which is hard to unpack. But I love that you had this character, Anna, and did you say, is it Anna or Anna? I guess I know both, and I read it in my head as Anna in the novel.
I wrote it as Anna in my head, but I was like,
Okay.
huh, I wonder how people will pronounce this.
Yeah, I like just had this moment of like, I guess it could be Anna as well. I do have a friend, Anna. But that she was there to help them try to bridge that gap a little bit too, like within her own
Yeah.
story and what she was working through.
Yeah, she definitely was kind of this character. You can see that um she has this way of just being able to rebound from things, and she wants to be able to kind of help other people do that as well. Like she just has the spirit of like, even though she's been through some really challenging things, she kind of has that, I don't know, can-do attitude. And she's like, okay, I can bring this together too. Even though she does struggle with some of her own doubts in herself because of what she's gone through, it's kind of like you can see that part of her character still is there, even though, she hasn't trusted in it totally for her own self.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I feel like this would be a great point to put it, insert here that Jenny had sent in a question that she said, let me bring my notebook over here. But what a great timely read for me. She's so identified with the character Anna. And her question for you was, who was your favorite character to write in this novel?
I had a lot, I don't know, it's hard to choose one. I had a lot of fun with the dog that's in the book. Um, because that dog is based off my own dog and her goofy personality. So that was a lot of fun, just for the pure fun standpoint. But I really enjoyed writing Cora's character because I love it when I have the opportunity to write a childhood version or a younger version of a character in one timeline, and then you see the older version of them, and you can kind of see what shapes that character later in the
Yeah.
book. And so she's kind of this fun, spunky character who very spirited, and being able to kind of bring that through in both timelines. But sometimes the way the bitterness has kind of shaped that spunky attitude comes through in the later timeline. So I had a lot of fun kind of playing with that. Different events shaped her life.
Yeah, I really love that as well because I think we don't really take the time with ourselves to think, well, this is what happened to me in childhood. And maybe you, as a therapist, maybe this is what you unpacked in your clinic. I don't know. But, that our experiences, we don't, things don't happen in isolation. So, of course, they're going to affect us down the road and maybe change a bit of who we are in a certain way.
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of one of the things I have the most fun doing as an author is just like exploring those, like, okay, what made this character the way that they are? And do they realize it yet? Or, are they aware of it? And what needs to happen in the story to kind of make them a little more aware of what has shaped them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What did you learn about yourself through writing this novel?
This novel, I've kind of been like just personally my own journey as an author over particularly the last couple books that I've written. It's just been this process, it like enjoying the process, my process,
Hmm.
and not trying to like fit my writing into different processes because there's so much writing advice out there on like how to write a book, how it should be done. And, of course, it is just like a wide array of advice to follow. And so I've tried to really embrace the joy of writing. And I am not the type of author who has everything nice and neatly outlined. And sometimes I really wish that I was. Like, I wish that was how I wrote. Because I love following instructions and like having step by step, but that is just not how my
Checking the
creative
box.
brain. Yeah, I love that. But my creative brain, when I'm writing a story, just does not want to work that way. Like, if I did that, it would all end up changing anyway. And so, I've learned to just kind of relax into that a little bit. And so with writing this book, it definitely took me on a journey that I didn't expect to go. I originally was going to write a single contemporary timeline with a
Interesting.
ragtag group of bird watchers, and I had actually written probably a fourth of the book or more. And it was all the contemporary timeline until I decided to go visit Bitter End, Tennessee. Um, because it's a real place. It's this
I
tiny,
love
and it
that.
comes up when you type it up in like a search engine. And because I looked for quirky Tennessee town names, because there are a lot of them. And I knew Bitter End, Tennessee, like it had to have a story, but I really couldn't find that much information. And it's about 4 hours from us.
Okay.
Having that flexibility to be able to jump in the car, we loaded up the family and went. And finding Bitter End, Tennessee was a little more of a challenge than we ever anticipated because
Really?
we followed the GPS. We were like all the way there, and then we're supposed to be like 5 minutes away, and we're going up this mountain road, and there's, it's just this winding mountain pass. And we get to the top, it's like, you have arrived. And we're like, I don't think we've arrived anywhere. There, I expected like at least like a little green unincorporated area of
Yeah.
Bitter End or
Like a
something. But there was,
house.
and like there were a few
Okay.
houses and things like that, but it was just really sparsely kind of populated area. And so I was like, well, maybe we took a wrong turn. Maybe this isn't like the area that it's talking about. And we go back down the mountain and we're asking people in the local towns that are nearby about Bitter End, and they're all looking at us like we've lost our mind. They're like, we don't know what you're talking about. And so I'm like, well,
Yeah.
maybe this will just have to be like a fictional place. And we went on a whole journey trying to find any information. And we made one more stop before we left at Roan Mountain State Park, and we were looking in the gift shop because I was like, they have like the little local history books.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I can find like one line in here somewhere.
Yeah. One
And
nugget.
I'm chatting with my husband, and the lady who's working the shop overhears us, and she's like, "Oh, I know where Bitter End is." She's like, "I grew up there." And she starts telling me like her a little bit of her life and her history. And she's like, "You only know about Bitter End if that's where you grew up." And
Wow.
she's like, "It's a mountain full of moonshiners." And my grandfather, that's what he did. He was a moonshiner. And so that is how I ended up with that past timeline, because I was like, this and these characters were just so alive in my head like instantly. I was like, I
Yeah.
have to write this story. And so a really long answer to your question, but it was like this journey of like taking this process and writing this story, even though I didn't even know for sure if that past timeline would end up in the story.
Yeah.
But I was like sort of following my joy with a story. And it's interesting learning how to do that as an author on a deadline, as opposed to, playing around with writing and you're, not in that um, like that
Yeah.
deadline. Things have to be turned in and all of those things. So I'm trying to learn how to embrace that joy even while having deadlines.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you got a whole family adventure out of it. And now,
Oh,
for
yeah.
listeners, having read the story, it just makes that ending so much more rich because the characters kind of like your past timeline talks about how they ended up there as
Mhm.
well. So I love that
Yes.
piece of it to learn that. That actually was the other question I got from one of the listeners that couldn't make it. So let me just toss that in there because she wanted to know about how did you write the split timeline? Did you write them simultaneously or did you take one and go with it and then do the other?
Yeah, and this was the strangest process because I have my other titles are like dual timeline in various degrees. I always like to pull in a little bit of the past.
Yeah.
But this was the strangest process because, like I said, I'd written a fourth of the book expecting it to be contemporary timeline. And then once I had the idea for those past characters, I couldn't get them out of my head. I kept trying to just sort of forget
Yeah.
about them and write the contemporary timeline, and I couldn't. So I'm like, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to write out this whole thing. So I wrote the entire past timeline from beginning to end with only
Okay.
a fourth of the present day. And then I wove it all together, which was a really strange process to write this book because that's not normally how I approach dual timeline.
Yeah. How interesting. But at least, like you said, you're like, you had a beginning of your contemporary too. So I feel like then you kind of had a little bit of a path there, you
Yeah, a
know,
little bit. Yeah.
being no writer myself, but I'm like, well, at least you kind of knew where you might go there before you pulled in
Yeah.
the other. But oh, that's really fun. I like that. I imagine like deadlines come, but have you been working on any new projects?
I have been working on something new. I'm actually kind of in the editing process of my book that comes out next summer.
Okay.
Uh, and it is called Things We Cannot Keep.
Oh, okay.
And it's about this young woman who doesn't really have any happy childhood memories of her own, but she's kind of made a life for herself restoring heirlooms. So she has this workshop of
Okay.
like a collection of craftspeople who have their own fields of expertise. And she is pretty content. She's sort of, um, well, she did run away at 18 and just sort of start over. And this is where she's ended up. And she's been really happy with it. But then out of the blue, this package shows up on her doorstep that is from an anonymous sender, and it's got an heirloom in it, and they're asking her to find out who that heirloom rightfully belongs to. And she really doesn't want to have anything to do with it. She can tell that it's from that hometown that she ran away from, and that this person somehow knows who she is and where she's ended up, which
Mm,
kind of freaks her out a little bit because she's had good reason to run away.
yeah.
And she decides she's going to kind of ignore it. But then a childhood friend that she's not sure quite how she feels about him because of the way that their friendship kind of ended, shows up, and he's not quite so easy to ignore. But it turns out he might be the key to unraveling whatever this mystery is that won't quite leave her alone. And so they end up on quite a journey, even across the ocean, trying to figure out the history behind this heirloom. So it was a lot of fun to write.
Oh, well, I cannot wait to read it. It sounds awesome. I'm so intrigued. I'm glad you brought, like, I asked that question because I did want to bring that up. I feel like you write stories that do cover harder topics, right? And things that maybe we don't always talk about, or you read it in other books and it can seem very heavy, but you do it in such a way that you're still reading and digesting and thinking about, again, like family estrangement we have mentioned already. And obviously Anna went through some trauma in her story, and just, but you do it in such a way that it makes it not an easy read, but like you don't leave the book like, oh, just depressed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that it's always my goal to leave the reader with a little bit of hope. Like even if I don't totally resolve everything or there's things that characters are still feeling like trying to figure out because I want to have that element of reality there
Yeah.
that things don't always like come together perfectly or come together the way that we want it to. But in the way that they come together or they're in the process of coming together, I always want to leave my reader with a little bit of hope that even if things aren't totally resolved, that it's going to at some point because these characters are on the right path to that. A lot of that is because that's what I enjoy when I read a book.
Yeah.
I sometimes I'll read a book and it's so like deep and it's impactful, but then when I close it, I just have like this heaviness and sadness that I carry around, and I'm just like, wow, life is tough enough, and there's enough like uncertainty in day-to-day life that I kind of want to leave my readers with that glimmer of hope so that hopefully they feel that similar feeling about whatever situation they're going through too. That, you know what, I'm kind of in the process, like this character is in the
Yeah.
process. It isn't always easy. It doesn't always come together the way that I necessarily want it to, but I have hope for how it will come together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's so true of life, right? We don't get out of here unscathed. Like it's not
Right.
not always going to be easy. And actually what I was reading this morning to kind of briefly summarize it was like basically if you look back at your struggles, it just shows your perseverance. And I was like, that's such a beautiful way to think about it because in the moment it stinks, right? You're like, I don't want to
Yeah.
be doing this. But it just continues to prove to yourself that the perseverance that you have in getting through it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and your characters are doing that, right? And that's the hope you can look back on. Like, okay, I've been through hard times before. I know I can do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow. Mom, I know I'm like, if you have anything you want to put in the chat, you can. I'll read it for you.
I did have a question about how did you decide? Are you like a bird watcher?
We'll be back after a quick message from our sponsors.
What, you got a pot big enough to put them in?
All the anatomically correct horses just staring you in the face all night.
I told you guys about the butterfly license plate I had, right?
Every week on Between the States, friends and guests share stories about everyday life.
The kind that make you laugh, think, and say,
yeah, I've been there too.
And the kind of connection you only get when real people open up and share their thoughts.
So if you want a show that feels like hanging out with good friends, where it's fun,
real,
sometimes a little deeper than you'd expect, check out Between the States.
New episodes drop every Thursday.
Between the States, a conversation you'll actually want to join.
So do that at
BetweenTheStates.com.
And available on all your favorite platforms.
So I consider myself sort of a backyard bird watcher. I'm not necessarily a bird watching expert, but I kind of fell in love with the birds in my backyard when my oldest child was being born. Well, after he was born, he was a very colicky, fussy baby, and he just really wasn't happy unless he was in my arms and I was moving. So that was the only time the house was quiet. And, me being a new mom, sleep deprived, my husband works night shift. I felt a little bit like I was losing my mind a little bit, a lot in those early days because motherhood's new anyway. It's a lot anyway. And and he was kind of struggling. But then I found myself looking at my back window. And when I looked out my back window, I started noticing the birds. And the more I paid attention, the more bird species I started to notice in my backyard. And it was something kind of for me to concentrate on instead of all my worries and fears of like, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I handle his digestive issues and all of those things? It was my way to kind of look out the window and enjoy the birds that were out there. And I found it to be really relaxing and it brought me a lot of peace. And so when I wrote this book, I'm like, I want to bring that to a book, like that peaceful feeling that I felt looking at my back window. I want readers to kind of have the feeling I have when I go outside or I watch birds or things like that.
Yeah,
Sure.
taking those moments.
I was just curious as to why you had chosen the birding society thing, but that's good.
Yeah. Well,
I
and
enjoyed
too,
that.
there's another little piece to why a group of bird watchers and not just birds. About 6 years ago, we were hiking in the woods in Maine, and my kids were pretty little then, and we ran across some bird watchers. And they were so friendly and so inviting, and they sort of adopted us into their group, and they were so excited about the birds they were looking at, and so enthusiastic, so patient with my kids, trying to let them look through binoculars to see, which I doubt my kids saw anything but leaves through the binoculars. But they were so kind and so patient. And so that was a little bit of that inspiration too. And I talked to another friend who had run into a group of bird watchers, and it was a similar experience. And I'm just like, okay, this has to be like a bird watcher thing. Loving what they're doing, loving birds, and loving to include people in their passion.
Yeah. Well, and look at all the peace that brought you from just being solo, right? So they're probably getting that same type of peace in their group as they're doing
together,
this.
Community at the same time. And it was very cool.
Yeah, that's actually, not bird watching, but if we are having a difficult day at our house with the kids, it's like, just get outside. I think it's the ultimate reset for all ages. So.
Oh, yeah. I read a lot of articles when I was writing this book about actually the physical effects that it has on us to go outside, just with blood pressure, stress levels, and all of that. And it's just really interesting to read about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. And I know that last time I had you on, we talked about who you are as a reader, but I think it's just as important. The same question I'm going to ask you is, how do you find time to read? Because obviously you're a homeschooling mom, you're a writer, and you're a wife, you have life going on. So how do you find time to read in your busyness?
I tend to be a reader I read on my Kindle because it's got its backlight on and everybody's asleep. And so I'm kind of laying down in bed and reading books off my e-reader as I'm drifting off to sleep. Unless it's a book that I'm close to the end of, and that's really got my interest, and that I'm staying up way too late. But usually sneaking in those reading hours when everyone is asleep in the house.
Yeah. I just like it came into my head as you were saying that. I'm like, it's like a do not disturb reader, right? Because I use the same, my Kindle at night when I'm putting my kids to bed, because I'm like, well, I can read with it. And I'm like consumed in something and you're just going to sleep and I'm here with you. So it's
Yeah.
great for that. Well, you've brought 3 new books with you today for a book flight. Can you tell us how you chose the books for today?
So I decided that for today, because we were discussing the Bitter and Birding Society, I would bring 3 um, books that kind of have some sort of bird element to them for us today. And so I have them from my shelf.
Perfect.
So the first one is the Hudson Collection
Okay.
by Jocelyn Green. This is a historical, so if you like historical books, it's really awesome. And she is a ornithologist at the American Museum of Natural History. And so that's kind of like her dream. And so she ends up, someone has bequeathed to the museum this huge collection of stuffed birds from all over the world. And so it's got a lot of really cool elements in it, but included that one on my flight.
That sounds fun. I've seen her books, and admittedly, she's been on my list forever. Like, I have to read those because she has a Windy City series as well.
Yeah.
I think, and being from Chicago, I'm like, oh, I gotta read it, but I need to get it on my list.
Yeah. And that one is set in New York, so it's kind of like cool seeing that version of New York way a long time ago, as opposed to what it is today.
Yeah.
Also have The Nature of Small Birds by
it.
Susie Finkbeiner. And this one has to do with Operation Baby Lift, when in 1975, the 3,000 children were airlifted from Vietnam. They were orphans. And so this is a story that kind of follows the family that who has adopted one of these children and her quest to find her biological family and how that's kind of affecting the family as a whole. But it's a very, very good book. I love this one
Sounds
a lot.
beautiful. Yeah, so The Nature of Small Birds by Susie Finkbeiner. Okay, and then what's the last one?
Have When Stone Wings Fly by Karen Barnett.
Yes.
And so this is kind of more of there's a little stone bird in the story that plays a key role in the book. And I also included it because it's set in a similar area as the Bitter and Birding Society and the Smoky Mountains. So if you enjoy kind of that Appalachian setting, you can find that in this book too. And I really love this. It's dual timeline, and I love how you get to see what it was like for the people who actually own the land in the national parks and how it affected them. And so that was really interesting to see because that's not something I had really thought
Yeah.
about.
You just assume they're always there.
They're just there. And I'm like, oh, this had like an effect that I had never really considered. And I love how she kind of weaved those timelines together, and you get to see past and present in the park. And
Yeah, I was going to ask that because I know she writes books about the national park, so that's kind
Yeah.
of in that same series as well.
yeah, and this
Okay.
one's the Smoky Mountain National Park in Tennessee, and kind of it has a lot of that Appalachian culture feel to it. So if you like books like that, you'll enjoy this one a lot.
Perfect. So that was When Stone Wings Fly by Karen Barnett. Well, thank you so much for bringing all of those books with you today. How I love to end our show is with our speed round of questions you can answer really quick. Are you a rereader?
Yes, it seems to get harder and harder, but sometimes there's just books I just kind of want to revisit.
Yeah. Was there a book that you read that made you want to become a writer?
So the book that made me want to become a writer was Where the Red Fern Grows, and my 3rd grade teacher read that to me.
I feel like we did mention that book in our last episode together.
I bet we did.
So, all right, where is your favorite place to read?
Oh, I like to sit outside and read, but most of the time I'm reading in my bed.
Yeah. All right, and then lastly, what are you reading next?
Oh, I don't know. I'm in the middle of edits. I haven't even considered what I want to read. I might read The Alice of Untold Stories by Sarah Brunsvold because I've been wanting to read that one, and that might be the book I treat myself to when I finish up these edits.
That was actually going to be my question because I remember when I was in grad school, I would not allow myself to pick up a leisure book because I knew that would be all I would want to do, and then I would not do the assignments I had to do. So I would wait, but then it was like when I would gift myself a book at the end, and I remember
Yes.
being in Barnes and Noble one time, and Mom, I was actually out by you, and I was at the mall at the Barnes and Noble, and I think I was there for 2 hours, and the same sales clerk came up to me like 3 times, like, "Are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? Like, do you need help finding a book?" And I'm like, "No, I just haven't been able to read a book for 5 months. So I'm really savoring my choice here."
Yes, it's like, oh, that's a good question. There's especially because like there's books that are coming out during that
Yes.
time where you can't really read, and it's just like my stack is growing. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, it never stops. For sure. It just continues. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with us today. I know your time is precious, and I appreciate all you've given me.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's been great chatting with you.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Amanda Cox, featuring the BFF Book Club talking about the Bitter End Birding Society. Her book flight includes books with an element of birds in them. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.